Is Greg Sankey destroying college football? Locked On SEC starts right now.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And what's up, everybody? Welcome to Locked On SEC. It's great to have you guys along. On today's show, we'll get you the latest comments from Greg Sankey at SEC meetings in Destin. And we also have the playoff field set for baseball and the SEC loading up the regionals. We'll talk about that. I'm Chris Gordy. Thanks for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Shout out to everydayers. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use our code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. All right, the SEC meetings in Destin are getting underway, and as we typically do every year, SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey kicks off the meetings by addressing the media. He kind of addresses some stuff that he wants to talk about and say, hey, here's what we're going to be talking about this week with the coaches and the ADs and so on and so forth. And there's a ton of things on the docket to discuss. Obviously, everything from college football playoff expansion to tweaking the system to, the changing what they just changed with taking away the, 4 conference champs moving to the front of the line. Obviously, a lot of discussion still, will the SEC move to 9 conference games? We got NIL legislation, revenue share. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. I mean, I've seen some people say, I hate where college football is right now. Look, I get where the root of that is. Some of the traditionalists want to stay, go back to what it was, the pride of playing for your school. And, it wasn't about making money, and it wasn't about, let's keep expanding these conferences and add as many teams as possible. I get a lot of the purists don't like where it is, but I will say, the sport hasn't suffered. I mean, the games are still super entertaining. And, look, as long as we keep tuning in every week and we have pride on the line with our schools, it's fun. So anyway, first up, Greg Sankey said this week at SEC spring meetings that the league will talk about football scheduling and the college football playoff, among other items. So first up, I did want to mention 9-game SEC schedule is still very much on the docket. We'll see how close they get to discussing that or adopting it. But I think a lot of that is very much tied to, are we going to get this automatic qualifier thing? We'll get to that in a second. But Greg Sankey was asked about marquee non-conference games, like keeping Florida versus Florida State, keeping Kentucky versus Louisville, Clemson versus South Carolina. He said, we would like to preserve those games. I've had discussions with our ADs. I've told them don't walk away from those games just yet at this point. We'll circle back to that in just a second. Now, as for the playoff, for more than a year, it has been reported the SEC and Big Ten are pushing for an expansion to either 14 or 16 team playoff. And in either format, the 2 leading conferences would like to get 4 automatic bids, 4 to the SEC, 4 to the Big Ten. The only difference in the 14 and 16 team playoffs is the number of at-large bids. It'll either be 1 or 3 after the automatic bids for the other conferences, like the ACC, the Big 12, the Group of 5, etc. Sankey was asked about the format. He said, look, we're not committed to any particular college football playoff format right now. In the past, the SEC has been in favor of simply the top number of seeds getting in. Greg Sankey asked about the future college football playoff automatic qualifier proposal. He said, we're not committed at this point to something. We're interested. So Ross Dellinger kind of spelled it out. He said, as reported, the 4-4-2-2-1 and the 5 automatic qualifiers plus 11 at large, those are the 2 primary models. So again, you can read, Ross did a whole piece on this breaking it down, but the 4-4-2-2-1 would be 4 from the SEC, 4 from the Big Ten, 2 from the 2 other big conferences, the ACC and Big 12, and then 1 group of 5 auto qualifier. The other one would be you get 5 automatic qualifiers from each of the top conferences and the group of 5, and 11 at large. So again, the SEC and Big Ten, keep in mind, take a step back. Why are they doing this? Because they expanded with 2 big brands. The SEC expanded, adding Oklahoma and Texas, two perennial powers that are competing for titles or should be competing for titles every year. On the flip side, the Big Ten added UCLA and USC, and they've added bigger brands. Oregon, I mean, it's monster brands that they think they should be getting 4 automatic bids. So it's not crazy to see why they're pushing for this. But Greg Sankey did say in the current college football playoff format, it's clear that not losing is more important than playing quality opponents. And I mean, this is something I've been saying for the last couple of years when they've been making their selection. Our buddy Graham Coffey, he tweeted this out. He said, Sankey's 100% right about that. He said, I disagree with the auto qualifier proposals, but it seems clear to me it has been driven by anger and frustration with the selection committee that is a moving target year by year and continues to rank teams by the loss column. In other words, a good loss doesn't matter to the committee. They are going to drop you because it's a loss. The numbers is what they look at. And I get it. The argument at the root should be wins and losses have to matter. But I also think good losses you should get credit for it as opposed to crappy wins. Who cares that you played Akron? And this is where I love bringing this up. Look at the last 2 national champs. Obviously, they did not come from the SEC. They came from the Big Ten. But 2 years ago, Michigan, all this talk about, we got the Big Ten. We play a 9-game conference schedule. What are you doing, SEC? Okay, great. But Michigan played a 9-game Big Ten conference schedule that had behemoths like Rutgers and other, BS teams from the Big Ten. But Michigan's 3 non-con games that season, ECU, UNLV, and Bowling Green. Last year, Ohio State, they played the 9-game Big Ten conference schedule. Their 3 non-con games were Akron, Western Michigan, and Marshall. What incentive is there to play tough non-conference games anymore? And the SEC has the argument, we already played the toughest, conference in football. And look, Big Ten, y'all can argue all you want. The SEC perennially is the toughest conference, top to bottom. The problem is the Big Ten is very top heavy. They're very bottom easy. So Sankey, again, that line about marquee non-conference games, telling his ADs, don't walk away from those just yet. I do think, what incentive is there for Shane Beamer and South Carolina to keep scheduling Clemson? Look at LSU the last few years. They've lost their big non-con openers against Florida State twice, against USC. This year they're going to play at Clemson. Why play those? Because the committee has shown they're not giving you any credit for losing that game. Just schedule a Mercer and be done. Turn the page, move on, take your rent a win, and put up a win in the win column, because that's all the committee seems to favor. And this is the toughest part for me, because we do the opposite in college basketball. We give the college basketball committee will give you credit. Lost to Duke on the road, they don't fault you for that. They give you credit for the tough non-conference matchups. Those always come into play when we talk about Selection Sunday. They bring up resumes and they talk about those big early season non-conference wins. And Auburn, they had a close loss to this team. It's like you get credit for that in that room. Yet with the college football playoff selection committee, they don't give you credit for, a good loss in a non-conference game. So why schedule them? I think we're going to be moving away from that. Other things Greg Sankey brought up, was asked if he considers balancing what's best for the SEC and what's best for all of college football with the new playoff. He said, quote, I don't need lectures from others about what's good for the game. I don't lecture others about good of the game or coordinating press releases about the good of the game, referencing the Big 12 and ACC in wake of the seeding vote last week. He said, I'm looking for ideas to move us forward. Well, Clark Williams from the Big 12, he jumped in on Twitter saying there was no press release in the Big 12, let alone a coordinated one with the ACC regarding the straight seeding. Look, let's get one thing straight. Greg Sankey is looking out for the best of his conference, and rightfully so. Who does he work for? He works for the athletic directors in the SEC, much like Roger Goodell works for the NFL owners in the NFL. Yes, would he like to get it right for the good of the game? Sure. But at the end of the day, the good of the game isn't signing his paychecks. His bosses are. In this case, Greg Sankey's bosses are the ADs and those who run, all the SEC schools. According to Ross Dellinger, SEC presidents did vote in March to grant Sankey the power to split the SEC away from the NCAA if Sankey believes that is the right move for the conference. That was something we found out just a couple of days ago. And there doesn't appear to be any current momentum toward that, but it does show the trust in the ADs and school presidents to say, Greg Sankey, we trust in you, man. You're making us a ton of money. You do what's best for us. Sankey went on to say, we'd like to see more authority on autonomy granted under the NCAA heading, and we'd like to come together for championships. We talked about an autonomy division under the NCAA and would be linked, but you'd have more authority on autonomy. So the SEC has asked for more autonomy for the 4 conferences. I don't have the authority to just depart the NCAA. I've shared with the decision-making working group that I have people in my room asking, why are we still in the NCAA? So pretty interesting there. One more thing from Dellinger. Sankey says the SEC would like to see 68% weighted voting for the power leagues, not the current 65%. It's important because 68% would mean that legislation could pass if 3 of the 4 power leagues vote in support of something. At 65%, all 4 Power 4 leagues have to vote the same. So, look, in closing, it sounds like, one, the SEC wants that guarantee of at minimum 4 automatic playoff bids in that future 16-team playoff model, and that's going to be their compromise for not leaving the college football playoff in the NCAA umbrella. But again, it's still very much in play. And look, folks on social media, and particularly non-SEC fans, are really taking it to Sankey. Here's just some of the comments that I was reading on social media. Jay Moser says, me watching Greg Sankey burn in hell for ruining college football. Jeremy Olson, Greg Sankey and the SEC are dead set on destroying college football. How will they do when they make 80% of the country just lose interest? Tim Marinin said, Greg Sankey is a jack bleep and is hurting college athletics. Lifer Jazz says, Greg Sankey is the devil and everything wrong with college football. Bleep that guy. Pitch Ags, it sounds like Greg Sankey does in fact need a lecture about the good of the game. Texas Hoosiers, assuming an Indiana guy who lives in Texas. There needs to be some sort of leadership revolution in college football ASAP, and Greg Sankey deserves the Louis the 16th treatment. And he does clarify that is a public guillotine for you less educated SEC folks. Sheesh. Look, nobody's calling to bad things to happen to Greg Sankey. But again, there's a lot of anger out there from a lot of people. They don't like what's happening. But clarification, Greg Sankey works for the SEC. He's doing what is best for the SEC. Other conferences aren't going to like that. Fans of other teams are not going to like that. But that's where this is right now. And again, to his credit, they're holding the line, but they want what they think is fair for the SEC. And yes, think about it from the idea of expansion. The SEC added these bigger brands. They don't think getting 2 teams into the playoff or 3 teams into the playoff is enough. They want a guarantee of 4. I've seen some people say, well, just let this thing play out. There might be some years that 4 isn't, 4 is more than enough. And maybe the SEC, there will be years they don't deserve 4 in. I get it, but it's a financial move and it's about the big brands. And I would argue, look, in a typical year, 4 SEC teams will have a deserved record of getting in. There was the debate last year on Alabama. Oh, they got 3 losses, all this stuff. But, they also had 2 huge wins. A dominant win over LSU in their house. Big win over Georgia. Again, this is where you get into not all schedules are created equal, and there's always going to be stuff up for debate. But, again, the one thing I'd like to see changed in all this is credit for tough losses. Texas goes on the road, opens at Ohio State in week 1 this year. If Arch Manning and Texas pull off a win over Ohio State, at the end of the year, I'm not going to hold that loss against Ohio State. I'm going to give them credit for going out and scheduling a tough Texas team in their opener. So that's just me. All right, thank you guys for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Coming up next, we'll switch gears, talk a little SEC baseball. Let's come your way here in just a sec. Hey, but first, guys, if you've ever checked your bank account and wondered where did all my money go between dining out, online shopping, entertainment. It is easy to lose track, and that's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. And Monarch Money, they're not just a budgeting app. It is a complete financial command center. It's going to track all your accounts, all your investments, all your spending in one place, so you can stop managing your money and start building your wealth. And when you start using Monarch, look, you're going to realize just how much money you're spending on frivolous things like, those food delivery services that do on the weekend. It's a night in, let's just order in. That stuff adds up. All those subscription services you have, they all add up. And look, Monarch Money is going to let you track all that stuff a lot easier. Managing money with your partner will be smoother than ever. Track all your shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without all the stress. Go take control of your finances today with Monarch Money. Use our code LOCKEDONCollege. That's Monarch, MONARCH, money.com. And use that code LOCKEDONCollege. You're going to get 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege. Get half off your first year with Monarch Money. All right, roll along here. Locked On SEC, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. Shout out to our everydayers. All right, as we dive into SEC baseball regional conversation, first I want to give a shout out to Vanderbilt. They outlasted Ole Miss to win the SEC baseball tournament for the second time in the past 3 seasons. The number 4 seed Commodores edged out the 7 seed Ole Miss Rebels 3-2 to claim the tournament title in Hoover and extend their winning streak to 8 games going into the NCAA tournament. The Vandy boys, man, they jumped out early. Brody Johnston hit a 2-run homer in the bottom of the first, put Vanderbilt up 2-0, and they never looked back, went on to win it 3-2. Now, Brody Johnston, their third baseman, was named MVP of the SEC baseball tournament. And Vanderbilt now 42-16 overall, the number 1 RPI in the country. Ole Miss, they improved as well to 40-19 with the number 11 RPI. And some other names on the all SEC tournament team. You had Ole Miss pitcher Hunter Elliott, A&M DH Jace Lavalette, Tennessee outfielder Hunter Ensley. So some really well-deserved names on that list. But the SEC, heading into the NCAA tournament, they will have a great shot at sending multiple teams to Omaha. They swept the top 4 overall seeds on Monday's selection show. The conference also produced 6 of the top 8 national seeds with the right to host through the Super Regionals and 8 of the 16 regional hosts. So in the top 8, you had Vanderbilt, Texas, Arkansas, Auburn, LSU, and Georgia. North Carolina and Oregon State were the 2 other ones. And overall, the SEC is sending 13 teams to the full bracket. That includes Kentucky, a team that was very much on the bubble, entering Monday, surviving to reach the tournament. Now, there was some not so great news for one SEC team, Texas A&M, making the history as they become the first preseason number 1 team to miss the NCAA tournament this century. According to Baseball America, it last happened in 1991. But after reaching the College World Series finals last year, Aggies, they were expected to keep this thing rolling, right? You lose Jim Schlossnagle just days after losing the College World Series. He switches over to Texas. And Michael Early, they stayed in-house, and it just did not work out. Injuries were a big part of this season, obviously. Gavin Grahovic and Caden Sorrell. I mean, they had injuries galore. Jace Lavalette broke his hand here in the SEC tournament. Now, he did play through it. We got to give that dude props. He played against LSU, I think it was that Friday night. I mean, it was like the weirdest. I see the announcement, like, he's going to play. I'm like, he's going to play. He just broke his hand yesterday. Took a ball right on the knuckle. And they said it was a pain tolerance thing. He just played through it with a broken hand. So shout out to Jace Lavalette. Still expected to be a very high draft pick. But for the Aggies, man, it stinks to see, if you're an Aggie, to see Texas get as the number 2 overall seed and your former coach, Jim Schlossnagle, leading them. And you start off as the preseason number 1 under Michael Early, and you'd miss the tournament altogether. So best of luck to the Aggies. We'll see what they end up doing moving forward. So what does the field look like? Well, let's take a look at the bracket and how this whole thing shakes out. So Vanderbilt ends up being the number 1 overall seed. They will host the Nashville Regional. They get Wright State, East Tennessee State, and Louisville in their regional. I've seen a few breakdowns say that's a good draw for Vanderbilt, that they think they should handle up on Louisville as the 2 seed, and Vanderbilt should have no problem coming out of that regional. The number 2 regional over in Austin, it is Texas, a field that features Houston Christian, Kansas State, and UTSA. I've heard from a few people that they think this UTSA team is very scrappy, but again, Texas heavily favored to take care of business there and come out of that field. How about the Fayetteville regional? Arkansas is the number 3 overall seed. They get a field of North Dakota State, Creighton, and Kansas as their 2 seed. Again, Arkansas, they've had some disappointing sports moments here in recent months, but feels like they should come out of that one. Number 4 seed, Auburn. They're in the Auburn regional. They have a field with Central Connecticut, Stetson, and NC State. NC State, a pretty good team. Again, Auburn should come out of that. How about number 6 seed, LSU in the Baton Rouge regional? They get a really good draw with Little Rock, Rhode Island, and Dallas Baptist as their 2 seeds. So a lot of people expect LSU to handle that one easily. And rounding out the top 8, Georgia coming in as the number 7 overall seed in the Athens regional. They will have Binghamton, Oklahoma State, and Duke as their 2 seed. Get into the other 2 host sites in the top 16. You've got Ole Miss at number 10 in the Oxford Regional. They'll host Murray State, Western Kentucky, and Georgia Tech. That several people say that is a tough regional draw that Ole Miss got. And Georgia Tech has been the early upset pick. I've seen a lot of people jumping on them to come out of the Oxford Regional and upset Ole Miss. And then number 14, Tennessee in the Knoxville Regional. They will get Miami of Ohio, Cincinnati, and Wake Forest. So it could be a really good showdown in that regional with Tennessee versus Wake Forest. The Vols have underachieved here these last couple of weeks, so they're going to have to put together and play their best baseball, but at least they get to do it at home in the first round. How about the SEC teams going on the road? You've got Kentucky as the 3 seed going to the Clemson Regional. They'll have to play West Virginia, Clemson, and South Carolina upstate. Oklahoma will go to the North Carolina Chapel Hill Regional, where they'll face the Tar Heels, Holy Cross, and Nebraska. Mississippi State, they go to the Tallahassee Regional to face Florida State, Northeastern, and Bethune-Cookman. Florida is the 2 seed in the Conway Regional of Coastal Carolina with ECU and Fairfield. I'll just tell you right now, I like Florida to come out of that regional. Nothing against Coastal Carolina, very good team, but Florida, man, they turned it on midway through the season. I like that Florida team. How about Alabama as the 2 seed going to Hattiesburg with Southern Miss, Miami, and Columbia? Another sneaky one. I think Alabama's got a good chance to fight their way out of that Hattiesburg regional. So we'll keep an eye on that one. So what does this thing look like in the next pairing? Well, Vanderbilt is paired with the Southern Miss regional, so we could see Vanderbilt versus Alabama in a super regional. Florida State's paired with Oregon State. We could see Mississippi State come out of Tallahassee and play Oregon State. Again, kudos to Mississippi State. They've played some good baseball since they fired Chris Lemonis. Texas is paired with the UCLA regional, so they would host the Bruins if they both came out of those and paired in the super. Ole Miss is paired with the Georgia regional. And the Rebels and Bulldogs did not play in the regular season this year, so that would be a fun pairing to see how they both matched up. North Carolina is paired with Oregon. Oklahoma could come out of that North Carolina regional, as we said. Coastal Carolina is paired with the Auburn regional. And like we said, Florida could come out of the Coastal one. We could see an Auburn-Florida match. Another one we did not see play each other this year. LSU is paired with the Clemson regional. Again, Kentucky could come out of the Clemson regional. We could get an LSU-Kentucky rematch of the 2023 Super Regional that LSU won. And to top it all off, man, Tennessee is paired with the Arkansas regional. Who doesn't want to see Dave Van Horn versus Tony Vitello in a super regional in Fayetteville? By the way, the Hawks just took 2 out of 3 against the Vols a couple of weeks ago. So, look, I know Arkansas fans are probably going to say, I don't want to see Tony Vitello and them again. Tennessee fans are probably going, I don't want to see Arkansas again. So, pretty fun. The selection committee, they always have fun with some of the potential pairings, and that is one that just would be a lot of fun. I'm rooting for that one to happen. All right, still more to come here on Locked On SEC, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. I want to return a quick hitter on the SEC, still alive in the softball world. Head to the Women's College World Series. We'll touch on that next. All right, roll along here on Locked On SEC. And the 8-team field for the 2025 Women's College World Series is set, with the action in Oklahoma City getting underway this Thursday, May 29th. 5 of the 8 teams headed to OKC are from the SEC. Ole Miss, they were the final team to earn their spot. They knocked off Arkansas on Sunday. I know our buddy John Neighbors, he was pretty distraught about that, but it is what it is. Ole Miss took care of business. Earlier in the day on Sunday, Tennessee, UCLA, and Florida all won their super regionals. Texas Tech was the first team to punch their ticket. On Saturday, 2-seed Oklahoma, they became the team headed to OKC, sweeping Alabama. And number 6 seed Texas and Oregon also earned berths. So here is how it shapes up on Thursday at noon Eastern. It'll be Texas versus Florida. And look, I think I know, we know what they were doing in pairing some of these SEC teams against each other. They want to, it's just sets up this way where you're going to have some teams eliminated or some teams take losses very quickly. And maybe they are trying to avoid an all SEC championship series, or championship game. But it'll be Texas versus Florida in the early game on Thursday, and then Tennessee versus Oklahoma at 2:30 Eastern. Ole Miss will play Texas Tech in the nightcap, and then the late night game will be Oregon against UCLA. Now, SEC softball analyst Haley McClaney, she is a big believer in Ole Miss. Of course, the Rebels took 2 out of 3 against Arkansas to advance their first ever Women's College World Series appearance. Ole Miss has since taken down 2 host programs in Arizona and now Arkansas, and the Rebels will face number 12 overall seed Texas Tech. McClaney says, let's not take out Ole Miss because we have doubted Ole Miss for the entirety of the postseason. I feel like they have continued to show up and show out. We could very well see Ole Miss potentially beating Texas Tech. All bets are off with how this offense is clicking right now and how well this team fights late in games. So, look, Texas and Oklahoma, they were awesome last year. They're right back here again in Oklahoma City. I think Oklahoma, you still have to say, is the odds-on favorite to win it all. They just they're so good when they get to the state. Patty's been such a great coach for them, and they're the odds-on favorite, and they get to play in their own backyard in Oklahoma City. We've talked about that in the past, but great field, and anybody from Texas, Oklahoma, Florida, Tennessee, Ole Miss, I think has a great shot. One more note on the way out of here. I saw the Reddit CFB account tweeted this out. It's just kind of an interesting note. They said 6 schools made the postseason this year in all of the following sports: football, women's volleyball, men's and women's basketball, softball, and baseball. And 4 of those 6 come from the SEC. They were Oklahoma, Ole Miss, Tennessee, Texas, and then North Carolina and Oregon are the 2 other ones. Now, in football, they're counting a bowl game as postseason, so it's not necessarily making the college football playoff. But again, the note was 6 schools made the postseason, and all 6 of those sports. Again, if you want to consider women's volleyball as one of the major sports, fine, but football, women's volleyball, men's basketball, women's basketball, softball, and baseball, and Oklahoma, Ole Miss, Tennessee, and Texas all making that grouping. Pretty impressive stuff. All right, thank you guys so much for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. For your second listen, you can check out the Portal Show. Brian Smith, he's got the latest rumors, portal entries, and signings. Go be the most informed fan on the rapid changes to the college football landscape. Find the Portal on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. I'm Chris Gordy. This has been Locked On SEC. You guys have a great day. Hope you had a good Memorial Day weekend, and we'll see what other big news comes out of the SEC meetings. I'm sure we'll have some more coaches talking throughout the day and maybe get some more quotes, and we'll find out is Greg Sankey still trying to ruin college football, according to a lot of non-SEC fans out there. All right, you guys have a great day. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Come on back and see us.